One of these days we're going to get a real podium. It's going to be great. Good to see all of you. You know, I appreciate that you trust me enough to come into a room where we actually offer tomatoes and eggs over there by the front, and you don't take advantage of them while I'm speaking. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Today is the autumn equinox. This afternoon at 2:15, 2:19 p.m. Eastern Time, approximately, for those OCD folks who want to be like right on the minute, that's the teetering point. That's the knife's edge as we strike this balance. We're finishing off this season of summer, entering a new season of fall, season of harvest, season of plenty. But if I'm honest, my soul doesn't feel the abundance that I want to feel. We talked about scarcity and abundance as stories that we've inherited this story of scarcity, and we have to lean into abundance. And there's times that it takes a lot of work to remind ourselves of the abundance that's all around us. Perhaps like that juvenile red-tailed hawk, we're out there squawking and crying and forgetting that we're surrounded by so much plenty. And maybe that's why we need communities like this. I know I do. Because this past week was just heavy, if I could be honest. When I'm coming into this space and when I was working on this talk, I just felt the heaviness of a country that has lost so much of its ability to have civil dialogue and to be able to find the common humanity that unites us. Instead of us finding common ground and talking about ways to end gun violence, instead of us finding the common ground to engage in productive conversation, far too often it's more important to be right, to win the conversation. When I say the series that we're in about the stories that we inherit, this morning I'm talking about the story of absolutes. And I don't know about what stories you inherited in this regard, but for me, coming out of a conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist household, absolutes and absolute truth was driven home at a very young age. There were theological absolutes you couldn't question. There was the absolutes of the authority of Scripture. The absolute certainty of knowing that when you die, you're going to a judgment, and then there's one of two outcomes for you. 3 if you're Catholic. There's the absolute certainty that says, I know that I'm right. And as we talked about a little bit in pre-talk, that certainty feels really good. Have you ever felt really, really sure that you're right about something and like that feeling that you know you're right? Maybe it was even in a conversation, an argument, and perhaps your truths, whatever they may be, maybe you clobbered your opponent and just completely decimated them with the wealth of your knowledge, how much you knew. We live in a culture that tells us to pick a side, to be sure, to be certain, to stay outraged. The truth will set you free. But the most difficult, and I would say the most transformative place to be, is not trying to find the sides, but to experience the transformation that happens in the murky middle. And so I want to offer as a counter story to this story of absolutes that perhaps some of us inherited. I want to offer us the decidedly less appealing, less comfortable. It won't feel the same as certainty, unfortunately. I know I'm not selling this well, but sitting with the nuance, sitting with the uncomfortable murkiness of a conversation, it's way less comfortable way less rewarding for your brain. Your brain doesn't give you the same dopamine shots that it gives you when you're right and you think you're right and you win an argument. But learning to sit with the nuance, with the ambiguity, learning to sit in that place, I think, is where transformation happens. I would say that all of the great wisdom teachers, Jesus himself, offered us a third way of seeing things, that when the religious leaders of his time would try to catch him in a right or wrong, a taxes issue, a politics issue, should we pay taxes to Caesar? A woman caught in adultery, the law is very clear here. Anytime you have conversations that start, obviously, you're probably in absolute land. And Jesus continued to confound people by offering a response that didn't fully land on either side or make either side happy. If anything, either side was kind of both a little bit wishing that there was some pull in one direction or the other. And that's what transformation, that's what this skill of learning to sit with nuance will do for us. So the world taught us that life is binary, that there's right and there's wrong, there's good, there's evil, there's us, there's them, there's right, there's wrong. Perhaps you grew up where the category of saved or lost was another way of defining. Why do we cling to these kind of absolutes? Well, as we said, certainty feels safer than ambiguity. It's more comfortable. And speed is more attractive to our brains than slow reflection and contemplation. Our brains have evolved to like jumping to conclusions. Our brains like the quick, easy conversations. We struggle when the situation is so complex that it requires lots of sides, lots of mental wrestling with these issues, lots of perspectives. Our brain begins to suffer under the weight of solving all these complexities and trying to bring some form of balance to them. And so sometimes we'll take the shortcut. Our brain will take the neural pathway that is the quickest and is the easiest, which is often outrage. Anger is a very quick and easy emotion. And we all know what it feels like to be outraged. But I wanted to take my cues this talk from those who have walked these pathways far better than I. The first quote in the bulletin from James Baldwin, this is from The Fire Next Time. Someone who truly engaged with moral issues that directly impacted him and other people of color at a time when our nation was being ripped apart by the civil rights conversations. He said, and I'm just going to read a portion of the excerpt that's in your bulletin, the illusion we must give up, the illusion of safety in our categories, good and evil, black and white, male and female, sinner and saint. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. Cannot say it better than James Baldwin. There is a safety in the categories that we reside in. And this past week, and the situation with Charlie Kirk and his untimely death that all of us can agree should never have happened, because to lose a human being is to lose a portion of our shared humanity. Every life lost can be mourned, and we can agree on that. But around this issue sprung up so many conflicting stories, and what we saw was a nation try to choose sides when the sides were not so easily drawn. Because it wasn't just a simple, are you for or against Charlie Kirk and his background and his message? It was far more complicated than that because it involved other issues that we're still wrestling with about gun violence. It involves the political and the social melding of religious ideas and politics. It involves so many things that to have a productive conversation about it, we would need to sit down over days, weeks. But what do we have now? We have the quick and the instant news media. And so we have very quickly described issues and sides. Our brain falls into that same shortcut where we want to jump to easy conclusions. And we want to be certain that we're on the right side and that we're right. But when we refuse to look closely at a situation, to listen to the people that we're inclined to dismiss, we risk becoming exactly what we're raging against. Not because we agree with the other side, and not because we're even asking ourselves to agree with the other side, but because the fact that we're drawing lines and seeing the sides to begin with causes us to miss the path of healing and restoration. Because outrage flattens nuance. Kurt Gray has a book called Outraged that I just saw yesterday, and probably had I come across it a week earlier, a lot of it would have factored into this conversation. I'm hoping I can share it in the email since, because I've been reading some of his work as a philosopher and social psychologist, and learning to see these complex issues in a way that brings and invites others into the conversation with a creative curiosity, rather than drawing lines that divide immediately and stifling any conversation, any nuance. Nuance, Kurt Gray says, outrage flattens nuance. And nuance is where the transformation happens. So that's what I want to talk about here as we kind of wrap up, is when it's so heavy, when there's so much coming at us. This is an aspirational challenge, and I can tell you that because I don't live and embody this as much as I would like. Like you, I'm quick to outrage. I'm quick to allow those deeper reptilian parts of my brain to take over because they're quick, they're comfortable, and those neural pathways are well worn. And outrage makes me feel like I'm doing something, because anger is one of those emotions that can tax your body and stress you. And you can feel after a session of outrage that you've just run a marathon, but you're invigorated because you're so worked up and you're so right. But sitting with nuance and ambiguity is far more challenging. I want to offer another piece of advice from a book that was transformative to me early on in my deconstruction. This was probably early back to like 2015 or so. The book Everything Belongs by Father Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan priest that has really created a path for so many to be able to allow their faith to breathe, rather than being so tied down. Richard Rohr, in his book, Everything Belongs, he says this: we don't think ourselves into new ways of being. This is super important for us as a spiritual community to realize. Nothing I'm saying up here, as much as I would like to believe it, I mean, rarely do you walk out of this with some kind of like huge transformational moment that just changes the course of your life. Because we know that we don't often think ourselves into new ways of living. He says we live ourselves into new ways of thinking. What does that look like? It means that maybe you once held a viewpoint about the gay, lesbian, LGBTQIA issue that may have changed for you, not because you thought about it differently, maybe you did, but perhaps you lived your way into a new way of thinking because you had a son, a daughter, a close friend, a sibling who came out to you. And all of a sudden you were forced to hold these contradictory beliefs side by side. We live our way into new ways of thinking. The dualistic mind, Rohr says, works by comparison and judgment. It loves to divide and label. But the contemplative mind learns to hold the tension of the paradox and to live with the questions. This is tough. It's not easy. I don't understand all the time either. This is the pattern of transformation. He says, not fight or flight, but the third way, which is a way of holding a tension of the opposites until something new and unexpected arises. It's how change happens. It always begins with not knowing. This past week, I've been trying as much as I could because I'm for the most part, off of social media, and it's better for me to do that. But I'm still very much aware of the conversation in the ethos and the things that friends and former friends have been saying and all of the tension that arises. And I've been trying this past week to go back to probably the most recent thing that for me felt like something I could better understand where other people were at, which was the George Floyd killing a number of years ago. And I remember, not even as a person of color, but just as a human being witnessing police violence, how much that shook me. I remember for days and for weeks watching the footage, every time I watched the footage, experiencing outrage, as you should. I remember how difficult it was then to have conversations with the other side, because as soon as you started to bring up even his name, there was a defensiveness. Does that sound familiar? There were conversations that I had that were dead before they even started, because before we could even begin, there was so much heated outrage and righteous anger. Everybody was at each other's throats. When we as a nation go through these kind of deep, traumatic, wounding experiences, we can't expect to just simply move on so quickly. We're still recovering from that. And here we have another loss of a life, a human being cut short with children, with a wife, that despite what he said should never have deserved being gunned down. We can agree on that. We can at least appreciate the parts of our humanity that emerge that says this is wrong. We're on a wrong path. So we're moving towards embracing a wholeness that comes from this nuance of holding these contradictory views and to be able to hold them together. That just like the season of equinox, we're craving a balance, and we're coming from one season and we're going into another. But balance happens when we allow seasons to change. We can't cling to summer as the truest and the best season, because to allow summer to happen, we have to welcome fall. And fall to winter, what seems like a death and a dying, winter to spring, new growth, and so it happens again and again and again. And just like the cycles of the seasons that nature invites us into, we're invited into a way of being that doesn't rush to pick sides, but instead to bring a loving curiosity to life. The closing invitation I want to give you is from one of my favorite Sufi poets from the 14th century, Rumi. And Rumi, who's probably best known for The Guest House, which is an amazing, amazing poem. He wrote a poem called The Great Wagon, and I'm not exactly sure why it's called The Great Wagon, because I don't remember there being a wagon in the full poem. But he says this: "Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. This is just kind of an aside, but I love that opening because I feel that that's one of the things that we do so well here at C3. When we can't find words to put to our emotions and our thoughts, we turn to the poets, to the musicians, to the artists. We welcome people like Matt Gabriel and others to come in and to share their music with us because we can find a way of connecting and saying things through the music that we can't say through our words all the time. Take down a musical instrument, Rumi says. Let the beauty we love be what we do. But here's the part I want to leave us with. Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, Rumi says, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to think about. Ideas, language, and even the phrase each other doesn't make sense anymore. So, as day and night are in equal measures today, as we're in this unique season of balance with this fall equinox, we can name this feeling that we crave ourselves to find balance, to find equality and equanimity and justice in the world. We crave that. We long for a balance. But we know that this world is full of hatred and brokenness as much as it is full of light and goodness. And so we have these horrible situations that we're invited into. And my challenge is to not be so quick to be right, to not be so quick to look at the sides and to pick one, but to sit with the complexity, the ambiguity, to bring a loving curiosity. So as day and nights meet in equal measures today for this fall equinox that we're in, we ask, what opposites are asking to be held in you today? Where have you been drawn to the safety of certainty? Where have we found ourselves in that camp of moral rightness, of certainty? What nuance have you been avoiding? What ambiguity are you avoiding because it is just so uncomfortable to sit with instead of that moral certitude? Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Thanks.